My name is Daniel. My wife's name is Sarah. We met in our mid-20s at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. She laughed at something I said, something that wasn't even that funny. And I remember thinking, I want to spend the rest of my life making this woman laugh. We dated for 2 years, got married in October, in a small ceremony at a vineyard upstate. 70 people, fairy lights, her mother crying through the entire vows. It was everything. For a while, we were good. Really good. We bought a condo in our early 30s. She got a promotion. I launched a small consulting business that slowly, painstakingly started to grow. We cooked on Sunday mornings. We argued about what to watch on TV. We talked about kids, someday, eventually, when the timing felt right. The timing never quite felt right. And somewhere in the middle of all that, someday and eventually, we started drifting. I didn't notice it at first. It's like a tide. It doesn't announce itself. One day the beach just looks different and you can't remember when the water pulled back so far. Sarah started staying at the office later. Her company had landed a major contract, she explained. Big client, high pressure, everyone was putting in long hours. I believed her. Of course I believed her. She was my wife. But there were small things, little splinters. She'd come home and go straight to the shower before she even said hello. She'd laugh at a text message and then set her phone face down on the counter. She stopped asking about my day with that genuine, leaning in curiosity she used to have. The kind where she'd really listen, follow up questions and all. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself every marriage goes through seasons. I told myself a lot of things. Then, one Tuesday, I found a receipt. It was in the pocket of her blazer. I wasn't snooping, I was doing laundry. It tumbled out onto the floor and I picked it up without thinking. Dinner for two. A restaurant 20 minutes from our apartment. A place called Aldea, upscale, candlelit, the kind of restaurant with a wine list that goes on for 4 pages. The date on the receipt was a Thursday, 3 weeks earlier. A Thursday when Sarah had told me she was working late. I stood in the laundry room for a long time, holding that little slip of paper. Dinner for two. I thought about calling her right then. I thought about texting. I thought about throwing the receipt away and never looking at it again, pretending I never saw it, going back to the comfortable numbness of not knowing. Instead, I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. And I started paying closer attention. I'm not proud of what I did next. I want to be honest about that. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't install anything on her phone. But I started noticing things I'd been too comfortable to notice before. On a Wednesday night when she said she was at a work dinner, I drove past her office. Her car was in the parking garage. That was something. It meant she really was at the office. Or at least nearby. On a Friday night when she said she was grabbing drinks with a coworker named Pam, I texted Pam. They'd been friends since before Sarah and I met. I kept it casual. Hey, hope you guys are having fun tonight, Pam replied 20 minutes later. Haha, tonight? I'm at home with the kids. What are you up to? I put my phone down. I sat with that for days. My mind ran through every possible innocent explanation. Maybe Sarah had said it was a different coworker and I'd misheard. Maybe plans changed and she forgot to tell me. Maybe. But the maybes were getting harder to believe. Then came the night she texted me from the office. Here's how I ended up sitting in that conference room. A client of mine, a mid-sized tech firm, had their offices in the same building as Sarah's company. Different floors, but the same building. I'd had a late meeting that ran over, and by the time it wrapped up, it was nearly 6:30. I almost left. I was halfway to the elevator when something made me stop. I can't explain it logically. Call it instinct. Call it the subconscious mind connecting dots the rational mind refuses to draw. I thought, she says she's always staying late. Let me just see. I took the stairs up to her floor. The office was open. Her company kept the badge access doors propped after hours sometimes. A bad security habit her building manager had complained about in their newsletter. I slipped in quietly. The floor was mostly empty. The overhead lights had dimmed to their after-hours setting, leaving only the ambient glow of computer screens on sleep mode, and the city lights bleeding in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I moved to the conference room at the far end, the glass-walled one that looked out over the whole floor. I sat down in one of the chairs, facing the door to the elevator bank. I told myself I'd wait 20 minutes. At 7:04, my phone buzzed. Sarah's name on the screen. Staying late at the office again. Don't wait up. My heart dropped somewhere into the floor. She was texting me from this building. From this floor. And she didn't know I was here. I typed back, "Okay, drive safe." Then I waited. At 7:22, the elevator doors opened. Sarah walked out. She wasn't alone. The man with her was tall, about my height, maybe a little broader in the shoulders. Dark jacket. He was saying something to her, and she was laughing. That laugh. The one I fell in love with. They walked to a desk in the open area. She sat down and pulled up something on her computer. He pulled a chair over and sat beside her, leaning in to look at the screen. I watched them for a long time. And here is the part of the story where I have to be honest with you. More honest than I maybe want to be. They weren't doing anything inappropriate. I watched them for 40 minutes. They were working. Genuinely, clearly, obviously working. He'd point at the screen, she'd type something, they'd scroll through documents. At one point, she made a frustrated sound I could faintly hear through the glass and pressed her palms against her eyes the way she always does when she's overwhelmed. He said something. She shook her head. They kept going. Around 8 o'clock, another person, a woman I didn't recognize, came out of a side office with a stack of folders and dropped them on Sarah's desk. The three of them huddled together. More reviewing, more talking, more typing. This was work. This was genuinely, actually, undeniably work. I felt the tightness in my chest loosen. And then, almost immediately, a different kind of tightness replace it. Because if this was just work, why had I been so afraid? I sat in that conference room for a long time after I realized what I was actually looking at. The receipt from Aldea. The dinner for two. The text to Pam that didn't add up. My mind went back to those things. And then, slowly, it went somewhere else. When was the last time I'd asked Sarah about her project? When was the last time I'd asked her anything about her work? Really asked. With the kind of attention she used to give me. When had I stopped being curious about her life? She had mentioned the big client contract weeks ago. She had talked about the stress, the deadlines, the pressure from her VP, and I had nodded and said, "That sounds tough," and then gone back to whatever I was looking at on my laptop. I had stopped paying attention. And in response to feeling invisible at home, she had poured herself into work. Into the one place where what she did mattered, where people needed her, where she could point to a screen and say, "I did that." The dinner at Aldea. I thought about that again, and suddenly, with painful clarity, I remembered. It had been a Thursday. I had been out of town for a client overnight. She had texted me a photo of a fancy plate of food with a caption, "Team dinner. Boss is treating us. Call you later." I had seen that text. I had replied with a thumbs up emoji and gone back to my hotel room. I had completely forgotten. The receipt was from a team dinner that I had already known about and immediately, entirely forgotten because I wasn't paying attention to my wife's life anymore. The text to Pam, I played it back. Sarah had never said Pam. She'd said Jan. Jan from accounting. I'd been half listening and filled in a name I thought I knew. There was no evidence of anything. There never had been. Just a marriage that had gotten very, very quiet. And a husband who had started interpreting that quiet as something sinister instead of asking himself why the music had stopped. I came out of the conference room at 8:47 p.m. Sarah was alone by then. The man and the woman with folders had gone. She was still at her desk. jacket off now, hair slightly loose from where it had been pinned up. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had been holding a very heavy thing for a very long time. She didn't hear me approach. When she finally looked up, she gasped, a short, startled sound, and pressed her hand to her chest. Daniel, what are you. I had a late client meeting, I said. Downstairs. I came up. She looked at me for a long moment. I think she was trying to read my face, figure out what this was. How long have you been up here? She asked quietly. Long enough, I said. I pulled a chair over and sat down next to her, the same way he had earlier, leaning in toward her screen. Except, I wasn't looking at her screen. I was looking at her. Tell me about the project, I said. She blinked. What? The big client. The contract. You've been working on it for months. I've barely asked. Tell me about it. Something moved across her face. Something soft and a little broken. Daniel, I'm serious, I said. I want to know. I've been half present for a long time, and I don't think I realized how long until tonight. So tell me. I'm here. I'm listening. She was quiet for a moment. Then she turned her computer screen toward me, and she told me. She talked for almost an hour. About the client, a healthcare company going through a massive restructuring. About the compliance issues that kept mutating. About her VP who had come to rely on her specifically because she had a gift for finding problems before they became disasters. About how much pressure she was under and how much she actually loved it, even through the exhaustion. About the colleague I'd seen earlier, Marcus, her project co-lead, who was brilliant and kind and drove her a little crazy because he worked even slower than she did. She talked and I listened, really listened, like I used to, like she deserved. At some point, she stopped talking and just looked at me. You've been worried, she said. It wasn't a question. I didn't trust what I was seeing, I said honestly, or what I wasn't seeing. Why didn't you just ask me? It was the right question. The only question. I don't know, I said. I think I was scared of what the answer might be, and somehow being scared felt easier than asking. She reached across the desk and took my hand. Her fingers were cold from the office air conditioning. I've been scared too, she said quietly. Not of you, just of how far apart we've gotten. I kept thinking you'd bring it up, and you didn't, and I didn't, and it just kept growing. The distance, I said. The distance, she agreed. We left the office together at almost 10 o'clock. In the elevator, she leaned her head on my shoulder. I put my arm around her. We didn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the bad kind, the cold, sealed-off kind that keeps two people from reaching each other. But sometimes silence is the other kind, the comfortable kind, the kind that only exists between people who have just said everything that needed saying. We went to a diner down the block and ordered breakfast food because the kitchen was still open and neither of us had eaten. We sat across from each other in a vinyl booth under fluorescent lights, and we talked. Not about the project, not about work, about us, about what had changed and when and why and what we both actually wanted. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were parts that were uncomfortable, things I had to admit that I wasn't proud of. The half listening, the assumptions I had jumped to, the way I had let distance build without ever saying a word about it. Things she had to admit too. That she had been pouring herself into work, partly because home had started to feel like a place where she was invisible. That she had stopped trying to pull me in because every time she reached, I seemed to be looking somewhere else. We closed that diner down. We walked home at midnight, our hands linked. The city quiet around us. And when we got into bed that night, something we had been doing separately for months, her asleep before I came in, me awake when she left, we actually talked until 2 a.m. The way we used to in our apartment before the condo, before the promotions, before all the weight of a life fully constructed pressed down on two people and somehow pushed them apart. I want to tell you that everything was fixed after that night. That one honest conversation in a fluorescent lit diner repaired months of quiet unraveling. It didn't work exactly like that. It rarely does. We started seeing a couples therapist named Dr. Okoye, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and had a habit of letting very long silences hang in the room until you filled them with the truth. It was uncomfortable. It was also one of the best decisions we have ever made. We learned things about how we each communicate under stress, or rather, how we each stop communicating under stress in slightly different ways that manage to perfectly miss each other. About how the absence of conflict is not the same as the presence of connection. About how love, real love, is not a feeling that simply persists, it's a practice, a daily deliberate choice. I chose Sarah, I keep choosing her. She chooses me too. She told me once, about 6 months after that night, that the moment I walked out of that conference room and said, "Tell me about the project," that was the moment she knew we were going to be okay. Not because it was grand or dramatic, but because it was the simplest possible thing. I showed up. I paid attention. I asked. It turns out that's most of what love is. Showing up. Paying attention. Asking. The receipt from Aldea is still in my desk drawer. I've kept it. Not as a reminder of what I suspected, but as a reminder of who I was when I was too afraid to simply ask the person I love what was going on in her life. I never want to be that person again. The night I sat in her office in the dark, waiting, I thought I was waiting to find out the worst. What I found out instead was something harder and more hopeful. That the person I love was right there, working hard, carrying a lot, and quietly waiting to be seen. I just had to walk out of the shadows and look. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if there's someone in your life you've been meaning to really check in with, someone you've been half listening to or drifting away from, maybe tonight is a good night to ask. Thanks for watching.